Hello and welcome back to what was going to be part two of our Airbnb valuation, where we ran a bull case valuation model for Airbnb and decided whether it was a good investment at the indicated IPO price. However, instead in this video, I'm going to break down and hopefully persuade you in 5 minutes why you should not buy Airbnb at the current price, in my humble opinion. Now, as I'm sure you're all aware, the IPO was supposed to value the company at 42 billion, and this was up from 30 billion initially. However, in true 2020 fashion, the $42 billion valuation quickly inflated to $100 billion before the public could even buy. To put it into perspective, on the day of its IPO, Airbnb had already reached its 2030 price target for my valuation and the majority of valuations done by people whom I respect. And this comes after a year of hurt for Airbnb, with sales sinking, losses expanding. It'd be fair to say that in the current climate, 2021 will be another challenging year for them. And to rub salt in the wound, Airbnb was most recently valued at 18 billion in the first half of 2020 when it raised money due to COVID. That means anyone buying at these levels is paying a 500% markup on their fair value earlier this year, without any material changes to the business. Now, I'm going to quickly break down in numbers what this valuation means for Airbnb and what expectations you would have to have for their future to be a market-beating return over the next 5 years. Firstly, let's look at the valuation metrics, the current valuation metrics. So, at the moment, if you buy Airbnb, you're paying 40 times the 2020 pro rata revenue, not earnings, revenue. We're also paying a 500% markup on the price that private investors paid in April for Airbnb, or they valued Airbnb at in April. And these are people who would have known the growth story, the future growth story. Of course, they were going through pain, but they would have known the growth story. They would have known the past performance, and they thought fair value, and so did Airbnb, was 18 billion for the company at the time. So we're paying a 500% markup on that. We're also paying a 267% markup on the $30 billion price tag that they set themselves in their original filing. So about, short of a month ago, before they got advice from what I can imagine was investment bankers to lift the price to 42 billion and not leave money on the table. But that's investment bankers, obviously. Unfortunately, whatever way you look at the valuation at the moment, it doesn't make sense. We can't even speak about price to earnings because there aren't any earnings currently. Now, whichever way you look at this valuation, it doesn't make sense. And I'm going to break down why. So if we play out a scenario where Airbnb achieves huge growth and success over the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, but don't get, completely carried away with ourselves, and we start to be a little bit realistic, but we get really bullish, we can start to see how rich this valuation actually is. Let's assume they can continue to grow revenue at 30% for the next 5 years, right? A hard ask for them to do, although not impossible. So they carry on growing bookings at the rate that they were doing in 2018, and 2019, which was their prime period. They do that for a continued 5 years. All right, not impossible, but hard. Let's also say that they can achieve, which this is the harder one, let's also say they can achieve an operating margin of 25% at some point in the near future, right? Which even they would admit would be a big achievement. People aren't really expecting them to turn over a 20 plus operating margin until, 2030, around about that. I had them down as losing money until 2025. But let's say that they go against all the odds and they can achieve a 25% margin, which looks like is their biggest stretch of a margin they can get without achieving massive scale. That gets us to 2.3 billion of net income in 2025. Therefore, if bought today, we would be paying 48 times 2025 earnings. Right, and that's only if they pull off a miracle. We're paying 48 times for 5 years from now earnings. Just think about that. That puts it into context for me, really. If they can pull off what would be almost a miracle, fundamentally, and a huge success for the company, we're still paying 48 times those earnings. Another valuation metric that's good to think about, if we're being conservative, really, we could say that Airbnb's total addressable market is actually the global hotel and hospitality industry. It may be a bit more than that, but if we're being conservative, we could say it's there or thereabouts, which is 600 billion, right? This valuation, currently 100 billion, would mean that Airbnb already has an 18% stake in the entire market. So they already completely dominate the market. which is, you know, a market that's growing at a low single-digit pace as well. Right, this isn't a digital payments company or software company. In those two industries where you see companies valued at 50 times sales because they're a key player and growing rapidly, but in a multi-trillion-dollar TAM, and that's growing at double-digit rates annually. We do have to appreciate, obviously, that Airbnb is far better, is a far better company with a far better future ahead of it than the hotels that it's competing against. We do have to appreciate that. It also has an ability to scale, the ability to scale in a way that they don't. But this doesn't equal infinite possibility, unfortunately. Now, finally, this leads me into my final point and summary. Investing is all about betting when the odds are in your favor. Though it is not impossible that Airbnb are going to pull off several miracles all at once, being the 30% revenue growth for 5 to 10 years, 25% profit margins almost instantly, while still investing heavily into growth and expanding their total addressable market significantly, or killing the majority of the competition. It is very, very unlikely. And if you don't believe that they will do all that I mentioned and they'll still just continue to be, you know, valued very highly, then, well, you're betting on the market staying extremely bullish and irrational for a long period of time. And to be honest, to bet on the market is not a good idea. And all of this means that the odds are heavily against you. Okay, so that actually just went over 5 minutes, but hopefully it persuaded you not to just jump into Airbnb, and hopefully provided some context to the current valuation. Of course, this is just my opinion. I could be proven wrong, but I would advise against betting money on miracles or the market staying irrational for years and years to come. Just my advice. Hope you enjoyed it. Leave a thumbs up if you did and subscribe to the channel for more videos. And until next time, good luck with your investments.